Textiles, an amazing world of the unexpected. A fascinating professional field with a focus on sustainability and innovations. Innovations that contribute to a more sustainable supply chain and more sustainable products. Textiles means clothing and fashion, a way of accentuating our personality. But textiles also means so much more. Textiles are everywhere. They are used in the design of living areas to create atmosphere, or as a method of communication. They feature in protective equipment, medical applications, dikes, roads, industry, agriculture and architecture. They are also an increasingly common bearer of an infinite number of crossover applications.
Innovation in textiles is hugely interesting, fascinating. We are trying to follow the market, what's going on. In fact, a lot is going on because everyone tries to work with solar energy, sensors.
Well, as a designer, I think the possibility are in some way, enhanced, or I wouldn't say endless, but concerning coloring, the structure of the material, for instance, I can imagine there would be an enormous variety.
So within textile, and especially applying textile, it's a very multidisciplinary field. So you not only need the design aspect, you also need like the chemical basis, you need like the tension, so like the mechanics of structures. And I think this in-depth knowledge about those three fields and how to combine them is really interesting.
For innovation, we look at how can we add new functionalities, or how can we make these functionalities more durable, so it can be used for a longer duration in the market, or more sustainable by looking at the ecological footprint of the materials.
So I'm Petra Blaise, and I started as an exhibition designer and became actually interior and garden designer. Started a studio called Inside Outside, meaning making the job of my hobbies of architecture, art, of course, and the use of materials and colors with mostly live materials, so textiles and plants, to influence spaces and to create environments, changing and active, dynamic environments. And when I worked at the Stedelijk Museum as an assistant curator, I learned that use of textiles to change an atmosphere, to accentuate an object, to influence acoustics, to spread light was very important. And so in the work I started to do with architects, I used textiles a lot out of necessity, really, because in architecture it's about creating spaces that are flexible. So in fact, if you use curtains, for instance, you create kind of flexible walls, not only soft but also easy to make them appear and disappear. And you use textiles for acoustic effects in chairs, on walls, etc. And of course textiles can darken, filter, reflect, absorb. And so I learned through the years, and I'm doing this already 30 years, how important textiles are in the architectural environment.
We have made a demonstrator where textile is applied sort of as a wallpaper, but then for the exterior. And the idea is to have, maybe I can show an example to illustrate it. This is, for instance, a design of a tiny house, which was a competition last year from the municipality of Almere. And here you can see a sample of a cladding material for the outside with kind of a structure similar to the seams in clothing. And this could be applied to the outside of the wooden construction. And I can also show some renderings here, where you can see how it leads to a different look, which has not been there yet. So in order to create a look which is new, that's of course fascinating for me as an architect. And the sample we used at the seminar here in Deventer at the Stichting Industrieel Product Deventer last year in March, we used this textile with a special coating on the back, and as you can see, you can sort of tear this off and then glue it to the facade. So the process of gluing, which is of course difficult because you actually need a smooth, even surface, is really new, because textiles as a tensile material of course have been used for many decades now.
Within outdoor fabrics, we are always looking at how can we add functionalities to our fabrics. So we have a basic set of substrate fabrics, and we look at how can we combine technologies to come up with new products, new applications based on functionalities like water resistance, flame retardancy, of course tear strength of the material, and the combination of all these functionalities, that's our specialty. Over the last 30-40 years, Tenkate has more and more developed in technical directions towards market solutions. We are in all kinds of high-end markets present. It's interesting to see in which directions textile can develop. So for instance, we are in artificial turf for soccer. We are in businesses like composites for aerospace and automotive. We are in geosynthetics, so materials in roads and in dikes. We are in protective clothing. And all these aspects, all these different applications ask for different functionalities in the materials. So within Tenkate, we're always looking at how can we combine with new processes or new chemicals, new materials. How can we make combinations to add value to our markets?
It's really happening now, all the body metrics, so measuring especially heartbeat and breathing rhythm is really something that's happening right now. In the US, like Signal is doing it, bringing it onto the market together with Ralph Lauren, for example. So also it's being more and more accepted by the fashion and garment brands. So I work a lot for example, the company Hall Center, who's doing beautiful things in printed electronics. So you can print sensors or actuators into first sheets and then apply them into textiles. I make them into garments again, mainly focusing on workwear or sports garments, so that they can measure your body metrics, how you behave, how fast you are, how your heart rhythm fluctuates. To learn way more about your behavior as a person, and also what you're capable of. Of course, these kind of things can be like a key information for performers in sports, but also of course at the work floor. But why not just for us being there every day, making use of the world, and also willing to perform as good as possible. So that are a few of the examples that I'm working on. I think in textile innovation or fashion innovation, we are very capable of sensing things, as well as from the outside, because textiles is garments is a perfect enabler and a barrier between us human beings and the outside world. So we can also in this layer we can put a lot of functionalities of measuring things that go out, that are happening outside, but also measuring things that happen into your body. And a little bit more on a long distance, I'm really interested in how to also activate garments. So how can we give this information back to the wearers? So how to give them relieve them, or give them a tiny massage, or maybe pump them up before they have to do something, give this presentation at work or whatever. So that's the field that I'm mainly interested in as a developer, and on the other hand, applying this into beautiful garments that you can just use at the street is something that I'm interested in as a designer.
Yeah, I think you will have lots of freedom because, of course, you can change the color. You can play with the colorization of the facade, but also you can use for different structures, different patterns in weaving or 3D printing or other ways of producing textile. And another example is, for instance, this specimen. Here you can see the textile as sort of a biomimicry kind of structure. And here it's applied in a facade where the textile is behind the glass to have protection against weather circumstances like UV radiation and frost. But also it will be able to carry the tensile forces in the facade. So the glass will be for the compression and the textile for the tension, and in between you will have the insulation. And then on the inside, the textile will be able to absorb acoustic sound and make a more pleasant climate inside of the building.
In fashion and academies, I see that there's a lot of experimentation going on with that, but in a way it's still quite primitive. And I don't mean it condescending, but it's still quite hard. For instance, if you want to collect energy through cells, and you have to transport it somewhere, and it has to be stored somewhere, and that kind of somewhere and the plus and minus connections are quite simple in a way, but the storage and the fact that you still need a battery and you can't really immediately translate the energy into light, for instance, or heat. There has to be an in-between step, as far as I'm informed. And that makes it kind of primitive, because you have to find a place to store it. So in a small scale in fashion, you see that there's always a battery hidden somewhere. So I think inventions are hugely important, and everyone's trying to invent something. We are usually working with things that are already on the market, but we always try to challenge production companies, whether it's lighting company or whether it's engineering or whether it's weaving companies, challenge them to reinvent themselves or reinvent or enlarge their horizon through our designs. And I think that's an important part of the role of designer or architect, that you come with a vision that challenges the industry. And therefore, if you work together, you can come to a certain solution that is innovative for both. But if you really come with a problem, or with a, I don't want to say problem, but with a certain program what you want to achieve for a specific project, which is actually fantastic because we have realistic projects. We have a building, or we have a site, or we have a whole urban plan or something. Then it's interesting for a company because it's immediately translated into a real project and in a real result. But that timeline, we discover, is very short for them. For us in architecture, it's already long because when we do something, it takes years, you know. If we make a curtain for a building, it takes 9 months to a year. But if we really do interventions and work with the architects or with the urban planners, it can take 5, 7, 10 years.
For our products, it's becoming more important to be flexible. Flexibility in the production process. It's important to customize products for your end users. In Tekata Outer Fabrics we use several coating and finishing technologies. These are in most cases chemicals which add functionality to the fabric, like water repellency, dirt repellency, anti-fungal mold, fire retardancy. All these functionalities are important because the fabric has to withstand for a long duration in the outdoor environment. I think in the challenges we face in innovating our industry and our products and services, I think it's important that there are students that learn more than just textile, especially the combination of textile with chemical technology or IT or other kind of technologies are very interesting to come up with new concepts, new business models, new products and services. I think for all industries within the textile world.
So another example is this garment behind me. That one is regulating the temperature, so it measures outside and inside temperature, body temperature, outside temperature. And then it heats up, so in the back panel you see a piece of non-woven material and 2 copper ribbons. So this is like truly textile technology, I think, where you then apply a little bit of electrical current. And then the spine area heats up. So there's a lot of blood flow going on around the spine, so that one also makes sure that it's spreading over the body. So I think you currently see more heat tech coming into commercialization, but that's mainly like gloves or socks. And I think this is way more energy efficient because you heat up the core, and then the body makes sure that it spreads over itself. So I think the excellent property of textile, as it is so intimate and so close to the body, together with this all the capabilities that the body already has, and enlarging those 2 components in this case garments, can help us so much more than what we currently do heating all our houses. Well, we only need this centimeter to be on the right temperature. So I think it's really interesting if fashion designers and textile engineers think more and more about this capabilities close to the body, also for like energy consumption kind of thinking. So this is example 2.
So we were invited by the Textile Lab in Tilburg, so it's part of the Textile Museum in Tilburg, if we were interested to develop something with them, something that would be a new way of using weaving or knitting, something that they have obviously available as machinery in their company. They asked us what we were interested in, and I was interested in to integrate solar cells inside the curtains, because we make site-specific curtains and we use a lot of space and we have a lot of glass facades that we can work with of reasonable large scale. And so we wanted to do that, and they found that very interesting, and they invited a person that was specialized in solar energy. And so the 3 parties together tried to develop, first of all, what kind of textile do you make to integrate the yarns that transport energy? So you have a solar cell that gathers the energy, but then it has to be transported to a battery or something to store the electricity or the energy. And then it has to be translated into usable electricity, which is another step. So we started to say, okay, knitting is better than weaving, because with knitting you can really knit three-dimensional. You can, like you would knit by hand in a machine, you can do the same. Then we needed to find yarns that were thin enough and flexible enough to be able to work in these knitting machines, because it needs a certain tension and flexibility to not destroy the machines. If you work on small scale, you have a limited possibility, but if you have a surface of 22 by 17 meters or something, or 30 by 20, you work with an architect and you want to complement the architecture, then of course this curtain also needs to have an aesthetic narrative or story or beauty or something attractive. So the ambition was aesthetics, a technique, integration of cells, and a believable way of really transporting the energy to somewhere. Anyway, the challenges were enormous, but we made a first step. And I think we calculated that if we would make that curtain of about 5 wide and 10 high, that a knitting machine or a weaving machine in the Tilburg Museum could run a whole year through by the energy that this piece of cloth would collect in the Netherlands. Not bad.
I think innovation is crucial for a company. In my definition, innovation is more than just product development. It's about designing new products, but also designing products differently, producing products differently, so process innovation. You can also look at new markets, new applications for products, and new ways of doing business. Can be for us or in combination with a customer to have a shared business model.
This multidisciplinarity, and that you also see designers coming in, scientists coming in. Yeah, that makes it really an exciting master, but especially because of the in-depth research that they learn there in this context. As far as I know, in the Netherlands, it's the only one that is bringing this information across. So you have a lot of more generalized masters that do a little bit of textile as well next to it, but this like really specifically focusing on, especially like the mechanics and the chemistry of textiles. I think that's a unique thing, especially here in the Netherlands. Yes, and yeah, the how to apply it. Yeah, that's really interesting. I really like the specificness of this master. That's one of my favorites here.
Our new master degree program, Innovative Textile Development, looks at textiles from a range of different perspectives and backgrounds, and combines material knowledge with knowledge and insights from other technical domains. Textile innovation, the international context, sustainability, and a multidisciplinary approach open the door for master graduates to a wealth of different jobs.